Welcome. We came across what we're going to term shocking book, freely available in the public domain, public access. No copyright infringement or breach was intentional. We wanted to present this book through this video for educational purposes alone. This is the book titled The Gospel According to Darwin, published 1898. And here's a couple of quotes from the Bible and also the man himself, Charles Darwin. The first reads in Old English: "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." Well, basically, in normal modern English, it shows his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night. So day after day, night after night, showeth knowledge, or shows knowledge. There is no speech, or knowledge of him. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Psalms 19:1-3. For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things of the law, these, it's got two asterisks there, don't know what that is, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts. Romans 2:14. And as natural selection works solely by and for the good of each being, all corporal and mental endowments will tend to progress towards perfection. There is a grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been breathed by the Creator into a few forms as into one, and that while this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are evolved. Darwin, Origin of Species. So here, this could excite the religious out there. They'll be rubbing their hands in glee and jumping up and down that Charles Darwin acknowledged the Creator, and others might be putting up their last string of hair. No, he didn't say that, but it's a quote from that particular book, Origin of Species. Preface. We'll read it briefly. The purpose of a preface is twofold. First, to disarm and advance the criticism of the reader, not to mention the reviewer. Second, to explain what the author would have done if he could. To the former end, the author wished simply to say that it is no sense the purpose of this little volume to furnish a system of ethical or religious thought, or the germ of a new religion, as perhaps its title might lead some to infer. Least of all to enunciate truths which are original with or peculiar to its author. It is merely an attempt to get a bird's eye view of a few of the influences affecting human hope and human happiness from the standpoint of that view of an attitude towards the universe which is best expressed by the term Darwinism. This term is not used, of course, in the narrow sense of the personal views of Charles Darwin, in contrast with those of other evolutionists, be they his predecessors or his successors, but simply as typifying the evolutionary movement and its wonderful consequences by the name of its greatest thinker and ablest champion, who first made the theory of evolution credible or even thinkable. This book's effort is to show that this attitude possesses a broad and secure basis for courage and happiness in the present and hope for the future. In other words, that its faith is as steadfast, its consolations as great, and its spirit of worship as profound and as powerful as those of revealed religion. That the message of the gospel according to Darwin is in truth good news, glad tidings, that the natural is as wonderful, as beautiful, as divine as the supernatural. It is no longer necessary to limit our worship to the mysterious. No conception of heaven which has ever been formed represents as great an improvement upon the existing state of affairs as has occurred every 2,000 years in the actual history of the race. a triumphal upward march, unbroken for 50 million of years, and which still continues, in which we are keeping step every day, is at least as worthy of our gratitude, our worship, our trust, as anything supernaturalism has to offer. Far from destroying or antagonizing the religious instinct, the spirit of worship, Darwinism broadens and quickens it. But, while recognizing its wonderful value and according it a high rank in the parliament of instincts, it absolutely declines to recognize it as perpetual dictator. Religion is but one of several great influences which make up human life and determine human conduct. Like any other instinct, indulged in the proper place, it is beneficent, ennobling in its results, but carried into spheres where it has no authority, it becomes injurious and degrading. Darwinism has no quarrels with religion, only with its excesses. University of Buffalo, April 1898. Contents page from chapter 1 through to chapter 12. Gospel according to Darwin. Chapter 1, the fifth Gospel. Every revelation granted to man is at the outset denounced as atheistic and sacrilegious. The flash that follows the "let there be light" sadly changes the face of the gods, whether they be the Dagons, born of man's fingers, or the dogmas of his fancy, as they stand in their twilight shrines, thick with the smoke of incense or hazy with the dim religious light of mystic contemplation. Not only this, but the dazzling glare pains to the blinding point the eye of faith until the familiar features, nay, even the majestic outlines of the divine form seem utterly lost, and it is little wonder that the shuddering cry goes up, "Great Pan is dead." The instant impulse, almost too strong to be resisted, is to turn the back upon the light which has wrought this havoc, declare it a balefire, and ignis fatuus, a lying illumination, and thus save both eyes and theology. There is plenty of darkness left to construct another shrine, and this is the course usually taken, in point of fact, but is wisest not to say bravest or manliest. Let's get back to you. We may have read that wrong. And this is the course usually taken in point of fact, but is it wisest not to say bravest or manliest? Whoever follows it proves himself to have been worshipping not the deity, but his own pet conception of him. Light cannot alter being, only its appearance. And yet, thou that destroyest the law and the prophets, is the denunciation hurled at every new light bringer. A courageous few, however, turn and unshrinkingly face the dazzling ray of golden sunlight, which has shot unbidden across the purple twilight of the sanctuary, proudly secure that whatever is true cannot be altered, whatever is untrue is unworthy of their homage. As ever, the bravest course is the happiest, and although the shrine is soon shattered and empty, while the rich vestments, brain-woven and fancy-dyed, with which, with unconscious irony, divinity has been adorned, lie folded upon the floor like the grave clothes at the feet of Lazarus, yet the roof is found to have been but a veil of twilight and shadows, and heaven above is revealed, and so forth. This is peculiarly true of that great burst of eternal truth which broke upon the world chiefly through the work and genius of Charles Darwin. Its dawning was heralded by a shudder and a shriek from every pew and pulpit, and Darwinism became a synonym for blasphemy. Its truth was vehemently denied, its logic mercilessly ridiculed, its debasing tendencies furiously denounced. It was to be given no quarter, for if tolerated for a moment, it would utterly destroy every vestige, not only of religion, but of the religious spirit. And yet this author ventured to herald it today as the long-missing fifth evangel, the gospel according to Darwin. Instead of destroying the religious spirit, it reanimates it and places it upon stronger foundations than ever before. This may seem an extravagant and extraordinary statement, but it can be shown to be far from unfounded. In the first place, it restores the grand unity of the universe and proves the fundamental harmony of its conflicting forces. There is no hanging in the balance between the forces of good and evil, no perilous and often doubtful conflict between a beneficent world spirit and a malevolent one. No such thing as abstract or essential evil, nothing but a magnificent scheme of glorious progress through conflict. Storm and darkness, hunger and cold war, and wanderings, nay, even pestilence and famine, are seen to be spurs to progress, mothers of invention, and the stern nurses of all the virtues. Never has the doctrine of the old gospel that all things work together for good to them that love the good received such tremendous endorsement. Instead of gazing upon a world of blind, remorseless chance or inevitable fate, so full of cruelty, injustice and needless suffering, as to absolutely require the conception or inventing of another world, to even partially remedy its inequalities, the Darwinist sees all things and all forces moving steadily forward in one grand and glorious beneficent scheme of advancement. Nature's only and unvarying war cry is Excelsior. The old evangelists did at times catch glimpses of this truth from the mountain peaks of their loftiest spiritual raptures, but it was soon lost sight of in the mist of the valley and fog of the fen into which the churches were plunged in that pulsy time which heralded the death of the great Roman Empire. None of them, however, even dreamed of a light which should reveal a harmony and an order in that far more bitter, more hopeless and perplexing conflict, which is incessantly present in the soul of man himself. Even to St. Paul's magnificent intellect, the only possible result is that one of the conflicting forces must, and inevitably will, utterly destroy the other. The carnal mind is enmity, or hatred against God, or dislike against God. Hate's a very powerful word, right? And is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can it be. To be carnally minded is death. In the mild radiance of the fifth gospel, even this struggle, like every other, is seen to surely and inevitably result in progress, to which both forces are absolutely necessary. The enmity between them is merely that between the steam chest and the driving wheel and the great engine, or more accurately, between the panting young giant and the cylinder and the piston rod, each fiercely asserting itself against the other, and between them driving the great wheel. Browning has caught the same ray of dawn when he cries, "As the bird wings and sings, let us cry, all good things are ours. Nor soul helps flesh more now than flesh helps soul." Our passions and appetites are seen to be the great driving forces of our nature, and even the term animal, as applied to them, carries with it no stigma of degradation. On the contrary, it suggests much that is brave, faithful, and self-denying. By far the longest, and not by any means the least noble, part of our pedigree lies outside of the human family. One of Darwin's greatest services was the proving that our moral impulses are derived not from education nor external revelation, nor from the cold calculations and experimental deductions of refined selfishness, according to either Bentham or Spencer, but from the warm and beautiful family affections, those ties of blood whose golden links are alike binding upon the dove upon its nest, the deer in its covert, the lioness in her lair, and the mother by the hearthstone. The courage, the patience, the cheerfulness, the affections that are in us are just as essentially carnal as are the lusts of the flesh, and the pride of life, and what is more, are more numerous and more powerful. Our deepest and strongest instincts in the long run are found to be on the side of right. The most exquisite result of this perception is a delicious sense of harmony and sympathy with nature and all that she contains. The world is no longer either vile or unfriendly in either its human or its physical aspects. The prince of the power of it has disappeared. All men of all races become brethren upon the common grounds of the great noble primitive instincts, and even the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air are glowing with that touch of nature which makes the whole world kindred spirits maybe. The only thing in that we could profitably alter is our own conceited babyish selves. Another proof of the inspiration of the fifth gospel is the calm and rational view which it enables us to take of death. To remove the fear of this has been a leading aim of all former revelations, but it is to be doubted whether they have not the rather intensified it, as they all unite in characterizing it as the king of terrors, the bitterest of evils, and the great enemy of the race. I'm not too sure, it doesn't seem to make sense. Another proof of the inspiration of the fifth gospel is the calm and rational view which it enables us to take of death. To remove the fear of this has been a leading aim of all former revelations, but it is to be doubted whether they have not the rather intensified it, as they all unite in characterizing it as the king of terrors, the bitterest of evils, and the great enemy of the race. The new light pierces these grisly, ghostly draperies, woven of fear and darkness. It shows behind them a gentle, painless, grandly beneficent process of nature, by which the old is tenderly and reverently laid away to dissolve and reappearing anew. And this continues. It's quite interesting but very long. These older books seem to have these really long introductions and stuff. They're endless. Okay, have a look through this book. Okay, chapter 2, the omnipotence of good. Man's conception of the world spirit have varied with the stage of his progress. Man's conceptions of the world spirit have varied with the stage of his progress. They are almost as numerous and quite as diverse as the individuals who hold them. Yet there is a strong family likeness between them all. A hasty review of the order of their evolution, if its triteness may be pardoned, is logically necessary to a proper statement of the Darwinian position. In the infancy of man, the controlling forces of the world about him were conceived of as numerous and purely local demons or sprites. So limited are they that they are conceived of primarily as actually inhabiting and inspiring certain objects or animals. The black sullen snag that breaks the meshes of his rude fishing net, the tree that falls crashing across his mud hut, the tiger that pounces upon his flocks, the breeze that frightens away the buffalo which he is stalking. These are each and all supernatural beings that may be propitiated by sacrifice and pleased by worship. They are nearly all, oddly enough, as it would appear at first glance, more or less malevolent, or at least mischievous in disposition, and the earliest worship and ritual aims purely to secure a policy of non-interference on the part of the divinities by flattering and coaxing, or even by frightening them. A moment's reflection, however, will show us that this curious tendency is merely the result of the much more vivid impression produced upon our senses by pain and ill fortune than by the opposites. The latter we take as a matter of course, a necessary reward of our merits. No amount of them disturbs our equanimity. The former excites our liveliest interest and resentment, and compels our respect and attention. Good luck may be left to take care of itself. No need to worry ourselves about it. Bad luck demands our immediate personal attention and promptest and most vigorous action to prevent its recurrence. Consequently, the dominant idea in the savage conception of nature is a distinctly unfriendly, if not actually spiteful one. As Sir John Lubbock declared, it is not too much to say that the horrible dread of unknown evil hangs like a thick cloud over savage life and embitters every pleasure. If there be any other powers at work, they may be neglected with safety, especially as the evil ones are so much more powerful and active. As the family, tribe and clan gradually organised themselves in slow succession, these explanatory conceptions got classified and simplified somewhat. Instead of each individual family or valley having its own particular familiar spirit, as was still actually the case scarcely 3 generations ago with the Barach Glass of the McIvers and the Banshee of the O'Donohues, sub 2 or 3 are agreed upon as the gods of the tribal country. And this increase of dominion and dignity on their part is accompanied by some improvement in disposition. Though, like the earthly prototype, the embryo Napoleon of this tribe, they may oppress and plunder their own people, they will at least protect them against the enemies. This is okay. Napoleon of the tribe, they may oppress and plunder their own people, they will at least protect them against the enemies, and even administer a rude justice among them. This is the stage in which the Ark of the Covenant is carried into battle, and the Philistines explain their defeat on the ground that the battle was fought among the hills, the native heath of Israel's gods, while our gods are the gods of the plain. From this it is but a step to the conception of gods who, except when their vengeance is roused or cupidity excited, are comparatively indifferent to mankind, and whose attention should be consequently avoided as completely as possible. Prosperity, especially, provokes their jealousy, and it is still popularly regarded as dangerous to be too happy. A little further we have the powerful group of deities such as inhabited Olympus, who could be friendly or hostile, according as the interest or whim suggested, and whose general attitude was that of a feebly good-natured tolerance of mankind. The first dawning of the idea of a general unity is here seen in the presence of a presiding deity in the person of Jove, or Hova, who, though of distinctly doubtful moral character, on the whole checks the worst excesses of his subordinates and maintains a sort of rude justice among and between both mortals and immortals. But even Jove, or Hova, may be bullied by Juno, tempted by mortal woman, and threatened by conspiracies of the lesser gods, while ever behind him, vague but terrible, is the huge black figure of resistless fate of, is that Mopa? Maybe it's Moipa. Of 8, which wheels him helplessly along. So far, malevolences and benevolence, good and evil, have been inextricably mixed together in every conception, the evil on the whole predominantly, but now comes the noble step, for which we are mainly indebted to the great Semitic family, of separating the evil and spiteful from the righteous and just, under the figure of the powers of light and the powers of darkness. At first these powers are almost equally divided, waging an incessant conflict with varying chances, man's assistance being often sufficient to turn the scale. Traces of this last curious idea are to be found in both the Old and New Testament, in such expressions as coming up to the help of the Lord against the mighty, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force, and in the presence of the saints at the battle of Armageddon. One of the simplest forms of this theology is the religion of the early Persians, where the powers of light are marshalled under or personified by the great spirit of good, or Muzd Ahura Mazda, while those of darkness are similarly represented by the great spirit of evil, Rihman. Both of these beings are regarded originally as divine, immortal, and entirely independent of each other, and are even represented as making agreements and treaties with each other, as in the first chapter of Job in the Bible, or assisting one another, as when the lying spirit is permitted to enter into the prophet of Ahab to lure him on to his death at Ramoth Gilead. But first they are regarded as practically equal in power and authority, evil, if anything, being the more active, and certainly much more to be dreaded of the two. But as the intellectual and ethical standing of the race improves, the latter gradually diminishes in power and importance, until at last it owes its very existence to the sufferance of the good, and degenerates into a mere officer of vengeance, or roaring lion, ready to pounce upon all offenders the moment that the favour of the good power is withdrawn from them. In the earlier stages, man prayed and sacrificed to or made his peace with the power of evil directly. A sin whose enormity and alarming frequency was inveighed against by every ecclesiastical tribunal up to the 18th century, and whose possibility is still to this day admitted wherever the belief in witchcraft or selling oneself to the devil exists. In later stages, he prays and sacrifices to the powers of good that they may protect him against the powers of evil. There is, alas, too much of this motive even in the worship of the 19th century, while to the medieval Christian the principal use of God would seem to have been to protect him from the devil. Indeed, so much as the latter personage feared and dreaded in all ages, in spite of his fallen and degenerate condition, and so incessant and tremendous is the struggle to escape his clutches, that one can hardly help wondering whether he has not practically become the real object of worship to the shivering and self-tortured monk, the Jesuit with his tortured rack, the beauty-hating, witch-burning Puritan, or the modern camp-meeting exhorter with his hellfire and brimstone. Judged by their frenzied excesses and their fruits, Satan, rather than Jehovah, is their God. Both Christianity and Mohammedanism, or today's Islam, while theoretically declaring that God is omnipotent, all-wise, all-loving, with the noblest of attributes and loftiest character, a being who compels our worship and admiration, yet find themselves practically very much concerned with a certain greatly inferior and defeated, but extremely active and malignant evil spirit, who, for some mysterious reason, though utterly base by nature and of wholly injurious influence, is permitted to exist, although a vague hope is held out of his ultimate extinction or disappearance. This hope Darwinism fulfills. The fourth gospel declares that the universe consists of an eternal God plus an immortal devil. The gospel, according to Darwin, rings out the trumpet call. There is no God but the good. It bases its faith upon no documents save the broad pages of the book of nature with the hieroglyphics of green and gold, no miracles save the old but ever new ones of the sunrise, this springing of the grass, the egg in the downy nest, no voice save that eternal choral in which the thunderous passon of the surf upon the crags blends with the singing of the morning stars, and there is no speech nor language where that voice is not heard. Man is inclined to worship chiefly those things and influences which can make him uncomfortable for obvious reasons, hence his idea of their relative importance. It may be only a curious coincidence, but the cynical suggestion makes itself that the light and life-giving sun god has been most devoutly worshipped in or upon the borders of the tropics, where droughts and sunstrokes were to be dreaded. In the realm of animate existence, what is the greatest thing? Watching the tiny shoots and delicate tendrils of spring life trembling in the blast or bowing before the rainstorm, they seem the feeblest, frailest things in the world. In comparison with the birds and the animals, the robin scudding south before the breath of the frost king, or the wolf crouching in his lair till the storm has baited, they seem like pygmies in the grasp of titans. By thousands they fall at our side, and tens of thousands at our right hand, shriveled in the glow of the forest fire, flattened by the wind, buried by the floods, blighted by the frost, withered by drought. Every element seems their foe. Their destruction is by wholesale, their reproduction by retail. Surely they cannot long escape extinction. They seem to have done so, however, for some billions of years, and not only that, but have grown and increased in that time from a mere handful, tiny grey lichens clinging to the inhospitable surfaces of the granite, into these myriads upon myriads of forms, ranging from the most delicate beauty to the most majestic grandeur, in the very teeth of just such hostile conditions. In the world of moral forces, which is the greatest? Is it the great, positive, noble, sunshiny forces of love, truth, honour, courage, or the fierce, narrow, bitter, crouching impulses of hatred, falsehood, dishonesty, cowardice. The Christian answers itself. With the exception of hatred, all of the latter group are essentially negative, merely the absence of the virtue which is the opposite. Alone they would fall by their own weight and can only exist or have influence at all as exceptions to a general rule. A man must tell the truth at least 10 times to be able to lie once to any advantage, and it is only those swindlers who have earned a high reputation for probity by years of honest living who can do any serious harm. No one would even think of trusting an habitual liar or cheat. Even from a mere commercial standpoint, honesty is the best policy, and that's what we at the Ministry of the Real Truth use. Honesty is the best policy, because if you have to lie, resort to lying, and you get caught out, well, you're going to have to cover yourself with another lie. And then when you get caught out again, you're just going to keep covering yourself with another lie, another lie, another lie, until people realise, wow, what a giant liar. We're not believing this guy anymore. He's full of it. So it loses your credibility, etc. The evil is naught. I guess this is from Browning, and he chants, the evil is not, is silence implying sound. What was good shall be good, with for evil as much good more. If this be the case, what need is there then of this conception of an evil spirit, or the conception of an evil spirit? Or what scope remained for the exercise of his power? What scope remains for the exercise of his power? It is curious to notice how the extent of his dominion has steadily shrunken with the progress of knowledge. In earliest days he was master of the greater part of the universe, for his sway was absolute during the hours of darkness. Indeed, he is known as the prince of this world to this day. He was a personification of that fear of the dark, which even yet casts a gloom over the infant or ignorant mind. But darkness was soon found to be just as necessary to life, and almost as beneficial as light, and the night demon is changed into an angel, whose wings softly hover over the bosom of tired old Mother Earth. In a like manner, also the storm, the lightning bolt, the ocean surge, the bitter tooth of the first frost, have had their devils cast out and sit, clothed in their right mind, at the feet of man, his best friends and most powerful servants. Driven from these domains, the evil spirits crave permission, as it were, to enter into swine and appear next in the human body. The pangs of hunger are attributed to them, and to this day the 19th century pagan of the Whitechapel slums will gravely assure you that she is a tiger in her inside, to whose claws she lays the pangs of hunger and the gnawing pains of indigestion. Then disease becomes a special manifestation, and the medicine man is summoned with drum and sweat bath and evil smells to drive him out of the sufferer's body. Traces of this belief are yet to be found in popular medicine. Finally, in this stage, death becomes his peculiar triumph, and charms are worn, vows are paid, and pilgrimages undertaken in the hope of avoiding it as long as possible. But now, in the clear white light of even such knowledge as we have obtained, hunger is seen to be one of the greatest and most constant spurs to progress. Disease, but health processes run riot, life out of place, and death, but the kindly welcome returns of our tired bodies to the warm crucible of Mother Earth, thence to emerge again in higher, lovelier forms. As the darkness clears away, the gruesome shapes that it has conjured up disappear with it. Last of all, the devil entereth into the hitherto undiscovered forces of nature, the realm of theology and the regions of the future. He has been completely dislodged from the first stronghold, but only partially so from the second and third, which offer peculiar facilities for his occupancy, being a thing ethereal like himself. Everything that good Father Boniface couldn't understand was of the devil. Roger Bacon was in league with him when he produced those tremendous explosions in his cell, as was evidenced by the sulphurous smell which followed them, and many a noble discovered was denounced as a wizard, or even burned at the stake for availing himself of his aid. Had Edison lived but 2 centuries ago, he would surely have been stoned like the rest of the prophets. In fact, the whole realm of the mysterious was a peculiar domain of Satan, as our colloquialism, the devil is in it, still reminds us, and to a considerable degree it is so yet, but as fast as mystery retreats, so does he. In the theological world, the evil one still holds an important place, as the author and instigator of what is technically known as sin, but as some human individual is held to be fully responsible and is severely punished for every particular and specific item of this transgression, it is a little hard to see just exactly what part the agency of his satanic majesty plays in it. If sin is the work not of man but of an evil spirit, why punish the former for it, or why punish the man for it? If, on the other hand, to which science cordially assents, every instance of wrongdoing is the voluntary act of some free human being, and further, in most cases, the effect of a primarily beneficent impulse run wild, a superhuman father of sin becomes little more than a figure of speech. In fact, his principal remaining function, even here, is that of the phantom warder of a ghostly future, or underworld, in which congenial limbo we may leave him for the present. To conclude, a being or influence absolutely and essentially evil is a thing of which the Darwinists can find no proof or trace whatever. It would be incapable of continued existence, even if brought into being. Is contrary to the whole tendency of the universe, and is absolutely unthinkable. This gives him the whole universe to love and to worship. The Darwinist God is neither a jealous God nor a petty or revengeful one, for he worships the Weltgeist, that great calm loving impulse which underlies all the forces and pulses of nature. Everything in nature to him is sacred, and any places whereon he standeth is holy ground. The forests are his temples, the mountains his altars, the birds his choristers, and the flowers his censers. The Darwinist alone can truly cry, O world, as God has made it, all is beauty, and knowing this is love, and love is duty. Chapter 3, the holiness of instinct. The soul of man has commonly been regarded as a battleground of two opposing influences. These have been often conceived as extrinsic, namely angels and demons, evil and good, but more frequently as intrinsic and inherent, as elevating impulses upon the one hand, against degrading on the other, soul against soul, immortal against mortal. The latter views fall mainly into two great classes, one in which both conflicting forces are regarded as equally immanent and indigenous, the other in which the higher or spiritual contestant is regarded as acquired or imported at comparatively late stages of development, breathed in, as its name implies, by some superhuman power. According to the former view, the nobler impulses of man's nature are proofs of his fall from a higher estate, remains of a Edenic condition of purity, traces of a lost innocence and holiness. This is the view of the Old Testament theology, and is probably found its highest and most beautiful expressions in Wordsworth's familiar ode on recollections and immortality. Trailing clouds of glory we do come from God who is our home. The other, which is that of the New Testament and of the fathers and dogmatic theologians, generally is that of the two warring elements. One is primitive, carnal, animal, sinful, while the other is secondary, spiritual, ethereal, holy. For example, St. Paul declared, I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. Urges us to mortify the flesh with the affections and lusts, and cries out in despair, who shall deliver me from this dead body? Literally, body of death. Or body of death, but going to die. It means you're going to die. And not only Christian theologians, but Buddhists, monks, philosophers of all creeds and of no creeds, poets, mystics, dreamers of every sort and age have revelled in it and re-echoed it until it has become a part of the household furniture of the thought of the world. The twofold constitution of man's nature from a mere figure of speech has come to be regarded as a literal material fact. The higher part, generally known as the soul, is popularly assumed to have become joined with the lower part of the body, much as a flower seed might have taken root in a patch of soil. Whatever is flesh is sin, while the aspirations of the soul are equally certain to be opposed, thwarted, and if possible brought to naught by the body, or not by the body. The mind of the flesh is enmity against God. The most favourable view that we are permitted to take of the body is that it is a slow, stupid, extremely exasperating, but useful servant, a necessary evil which must be tolerated and even humoured to some extent, because it would be difficult to get along entirely without it. This was the feeling of the monk Francis de Assisi, who, though so full of love for all others of God's creatures, that he actually conceived and carried out the beautiful ideal of formally preaching the gospel to the birds and the fishes on the lakeshore, could only find it in his heart to say of his own body, when told that it had been so weakened by fastings and vigils as to be hopelessly diseased, "I have sinned against my brother, the ass." It's a donkey or a mule, right? He's not being sarcastic about his brother, saying, "Oh, what an ass." But even this amount of contemplation, toleration, is rare. More commonly, the body is described and regarded as a dull clod, a house of clay, a sepulchre, a prison against the bars of which the imprisoned soul beats its wounded pinions until death comes to its release, all of which is about as reasonable as if a buttercup should revive the soil which hung about its roots and forcibly prevented it from floating off across the meadow lands with every zephyr that blew. The soil has not only produced the buttercup, but will produce, after it has passed away, thousands of nobler, grander forms than anything its shallow little golden pate or pate could even conceive of. Fear not lest existence, closing your account and mine, shall know the light no more. The eternal sake from the bowl has poured millions of bubbles like us and will pour. Even so, the body stuff of these ecstatic dreamers has not only produced them, dreams and all, though how much to its own credit is to be doubted, but has within itself grander and lovelier possibilities than even the loftiest imaginings can depict, to say nothing of the morbid, childish phantasmagoria which form the bulk of such visions. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath it entered into the heart of man to conceive the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But the truly spiritually minded of all creeds have not stopped even here. It is not enough for them to regard the body as a mere clog upon the flight of the soul, a passive hindrance to spiritual progress, but they openly declare war upon it as their soul's bitterest enemy, and as something actually sinful in itself, a creature so degraded and so essentially vicious that to deprive it of its comforts, thwart its impulses, nay, even tortures it, and refuse to supply its simplest wants, becomes positively meritorious. Renunciation, in plain English, cowardly desertion of wife and children, parents, in short, of all family and social ties, the abstaining from food, from drink, from shelter and warmth, scourging the back with chains until the blood comes, cutting the feet into ribbons by barefoot pilgrimages over stony roads, lying stark naked upon icy pavements all night long, and even such well-nigh ludicrous mortifications as wearing hair shirts, walking with peas in one's shoes, refusing to wash, combing the hair, change of clothing, have been accepted as deeds of saintly odour. In fact, the principle appears to have been that the more a man can humiliate and torture his body and himself, the more he will glorify and please God, the God that made him. The God that made it. Made that body. To such an extreme has it been carried that not only are the selfish appetites and impulses of the body to be repressed, but even its kindly altruistic altruistic ones. Paul commands us to mortify the flesh with the affections as well as the lust thereof. And even in our own century, grave and learned theologians, after much deliberation, have decided that natural goodness and the graces of nature are sins in the sight of God, and even deeds of righteousness by the unregenerate will be counted against him as sins in the great day of judgment. To say that such utter antagonism between plant and soil, egg and meat, egg and nest, fish and water, child and mother is not only absolutely unparalleled but flatly contradictory to everything else in nature would be simply waste of breath, for we should be promptly informed that we were no longer under nature but under grace. Fortunately, our retort delivers us from such grace, though instinctive, is unnecessary, for the remorseless logic of events has already accomplished this. Wherever this belief has gone, it has written its progress in letters of blood. It's true, nature stands revealed in the filthy, degrading hermit craze, in the black plague of monasticism, with its fever fits, the Inquisition, Jesuitism, St. Bartholomew's Eve, and religious murders and persecutions of every description, and has left a broad, black, shameful brand across the pages of European history, which has come perilously near stamping a bar sinister across the escutcheon of Christianity. By experiencing utterly discredited, practically dead, it survives only in the formal theology of the modern church, though, fortunately, like many of its associates there, it has become pure theory which everyone believes but no one dreams of living up to. The dual conception of man's nature, with its conflict between two great opposing forces, is strikingly similar to that which is held in regard to the world about us, and like it will, this is what the author thought, be found upon, or what he thinks, be found upon, let's rephrase it, and like it will, the author thought, be found upon closer study to be based upon a misunderstanding or a judging from appearances without investigating the real nature of the phenomena. When we come to weigh the question systematically, which is the greater, good or evil, passion or virtue, love or selfishness, we are promptly driven to the unexpected and even unwelcome conclusion that there is no ground for debating the question, as absolutely all of these opposites are found to be merely varying intensities under different circumstances of one and the same set of impulses. Passion is but blameless, healthful appetite run riot. Hatred is but righteous resentment become morbid. Envy is a jaundiced desire to excel. The principle of every sin that can be mentioned except lying is a natural beneficent instinct. Crime is simply lack of control. Right and wrong are broadly considered purely relative terms. Absolutely no impulse is primarily and essentially evil or sinful, though any may become so, if uncontrolled. No action is of itself wrong. The circumstances under which it takes place alone determine its moral quality. This statement will appear like a truism to all who have calmly considered the question, but its converse may not be quite so readily accepted, though equally true and important. That there is no impulse so high or holy that it may not, if followed to an extreme, become both degrading and sinful, and no action so beneficent or so saintly that it may not, under certain circumstances, be both harmful and immoral. We hope that you found this book very interesting. If you did and you like this book, you like this video, please subscribe to us, give us a like, add your comments below, and then go share this particular video with all your family, friends and others. the Gospel according to Darwin. It's actually quite a very interesting book. A lot of ideas, wild ideas, claims, which may or may not actually be correct. We think in a sense, yep, it's correct. And in other ways, I'm not too sure on that one. Life eternal. Just one more thing here. Life eternal. The eternal life of the Master is now and has been from all eternity. He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life. His commandment is life everlasting. The kingdom of God is within you. This is life everlasting, that they may know thee, the only true God. This is no mere endless prolongation of petty individual existence. It is something far nobler and higher than this. Here Farah's burning words. The use of the word, can't really see that. Maybe it's a Greek or something. It's really small. Yeah, it's Greek. And of its Hebrew equivalent, Olam, throughout the whole of Scripture ought to have been sufficient to prove every thoughtful and unbiased student that it altogether transcends the thoroughly vulgar and unmeaning conception of endless. Nothing perhaps tends to prove more clearly that the difficulty of eradicating an error that has once taken deep and age-long root in the minds of theologians, and the fact that it should be necessary to prove that the word eternal, far from being a more equivalent for everlasting, never means everlasting at all, except by reflection from the substantives to which it is joined. That it is only joined to those substantives because it connotes ideas which transcend all time. That to make it mean nothing but time endlessly prolonged is to degrade it by filling with a merely relative conception which it is meant to supersede, and by emptying it of all the highest conceptions which it probably includes. As to a continued individual existence after death, it is nowhere definitely taught by the Master, and is only even implied on any broad and reasonable principle of interpretation in three of his sayings. This may seem an extreme statement, but the author put forth a challenge proof to the contrary from the Gospels. The three passages alluded to are the parable of Dives or Dives and Lazarus, the decision upon the case of the woman who had 7 husbands, and the promise to the thief of the cross. The first of these is a parable pure and simple, spoken to the scoffing, sneering Pharisees. The story is taken directly and bodily from rabbinical literature, a weapon from their own armoury turned against them with deadliest effect. If it be regarded as anything more than this, it is bathos, for it depicts a state of affairs which would be almost more intolerable for the saved than for the lost. In the second instance, the question is squarely asked and answer distinctly declined. All that the Master vouchsafes in his wisdom is that Abraham, Isaac and Jacob are still living, of which the whole Jewish nation was bodily proof. But as to the woman in question, in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God. To the dying thief were spoken the thrilling words, "This day shalt thou be with me in paradise." And was he not? Yea, verily in the paradise of the love and sympathy of all Christian hearts, through all the ages, since and to come. If it is to be taken literally, what are we to make of Christ saying to Mary 2 days later in the garden of the sepulchre, touch me not, for I am not yet ascended unto my Father? In other words, he hasn't been lifted up and taken into the kingdom of God and sat next to him on the right hand side, etc., on his own throne, all that sort of stuff. So she couldn't touch him, maybe because he had this holy body or something. All other references of this sort which have even the appearance of being personal and are a mystery. All other references of this sort which have even the appearance of being personal are to a mysterious second coming in the clouds of heaven, which it is distinctly stated shall take place within the lifetime of that generation. If a man keepeth my commandments, he shall never taste of death. In my Father's house are many mansions, are not only as well, but better explained by referring them to the ultimate triumph of good in the deathlessness of truth. Why, when Christ distinctly tells us that the kingdom of God is within us, that to know God is life everlasting, and that he is the resurrection, the bewildering, beautiful instance of the creation of life out of the dust of the earth, we should obstinately persist in referring and postponing all three to some mysterious future region beyond the skies and beyond the tomb. It's hard to understand. Even that matchless epitome of the wants and aspirations of the human heart, the Lord's Prayer, Revised Version Luke, contains not a word of allusion to such a region. The grandly majestic Last Judgment is the verdict of history, and nothing could be more unorthodox than its superb criterion, which is neither creed nor faith nor even intentioned service of God. Lord, when we saw thee and hungered and fed thee, or in English, when we saw you or people like you, suffering, the homeless, etc., the hungry, didn't we feed them? But the broad and noble principle of common humanity, inasmuch as ye did it unto the least of these, my brethren, ye did it unto me. So if you help these people, these homeless, these hungry, then you are basically doing it for Christ. In short, he's got Greek there, of Christ is literally the life of the ages of Darwin. How does that work out?